questions will be Jack O'Keefe, whose presentation is entitled Exploring the Influence of Colonialism on Ethics and Accountability in Alternative Spiritual Teaching and Proposing a New System of Accountability. Jack O'Keefe has followed a disciplined spiritual path for over 25 years, including 15 years as an international spiritual teacher. Her books include Born to be Free and How to be a Spiritual Rebel. She is a theology graduate with postgraduate studies in adult and community education. She's also a facilitator of the right use of power and financial coaching. Jack is a co-founder and president of the Association for Spiritual Integrity, which supports teachers and leaders in both their spiritual and personal development. Please join me in welcoming Jack O'Keefe.
Hello everybody, here and at home, wherever you are. I'm Irish, and I was reared in Ireland for the first 37 years of my life. And while Ireland became a republic just over 100 years ago now, similarly to what Sudarshan said earlier about the Hindu and the Muslim fighting continuing post-English colonization, so too we had a civil war in Ireland until the mid-90s. It takes an awful long time after a colonized community gets their lands back, gets their autonomy back, by the time they can actually step forward and be autonomous and drop the fight and learn how to have a calm nervous system and trust that it's okay to own your lands and your education and your language again. It takes a long time. When I was a teenager, I remember going to Europe during the summer, as we did, obviously, during summer vacation from university. There was a series of us who came back after the summer where we had noticed these signs in England, which we would kind of understand, but they were in Germany and other mainland Europe, campsites and pubs. No blacks, no dogs, no Irish. These were the signs. And I remember having these discussions with my peers in university saying, why, I understand it between the Irish and the English, we still have to find peace. But what's the collective consciousness of mainland Europe doing buying into this? The racism against black people and racism against the Irish. Like, how did that spread to Germany? How did that power differential become culturally acceptable as the new norm when they had no history of it? And then in 2013, I moved to St. Augustine and I lived there for 7 years. But in St. Augustine, I was seen as a European oppressor. So then I was the other side of the coin. So it was really interesting because, when you're on a spiritual path, you use every single experience as grist for the mill. It's like, oh my God, this is the other side. This is what it's like to be seen as the oppressor. So I found forgiveness for both sides. It brought some kind of peace to my Irishness and to what it is to be colonized by, countries that are fighting for security and operating out of fear and looking at greed as a way of finding their power instead of going within to find it. But not everybody's on a spiritual path. And so inward looking, it happens at a particular time in our evolution, but it doesn't happen everybody at the same time. But looking back at about 7 years ago, a few of us set up the Association for Spiritual Integrity because we knew that we were part of a cultural collective that has bought into these agreed influences. And how are we manipulating, unaware, unwittingly exploiting the power differential that we've inherited that exists between the guru and disciple, the spiritual teacher and student, the spiritual leader and follower. Same model. And so what are the penetrating cultural agreements that we are supporting as spiritual leaders? And so this is the kind of thing that interests us in the ASI. What can we do about this? From a place of love, from the place of listening with our heart, from seeing what wants to happen rather than this is wrong, this is right. It's like, that's part of the old system, and that ain't going to get us any place new. We have to approach this in a new way to see what wants to happen, and that's how we function in the ASI, what wants to happen here. And so looking at spirituality, when I look at spiritual leadership, there are two ways primarily that power comes into play. So as spiritual leaders and as a spiritual leader, and as president of an organization that supports primarily spiritual leaders, I'm talking about a we space, meaning spiritual leaders. We have role power and we have status power. So Dan, if you'd like to pop up the first slide. Thank you. You can go into the slideshow maybe? Yeah, well done, thank you. So role power, it's natural. If you're a cop, if you're a teacher, no matter what you do, role power is the power that accompanies your professional role. It's earned and it carries responsibility. So if your role power sets you as a service provider and somebody's paying for that, you have more power, therefore you have more accountability, you have more responsibility. Status power, this includes privileges that are unconscious and often harmful. And my greatest plea today is to maybe ignite interest in our own inner inquiry. How am I using status power? Am I in some way benefiting and not recognizing that I have status power? Status power is a culturally specific agreement which includes a hierarchy. It always includes a hierarchy. So a few weeks ago, I decided, okay, from a student's perspective, if there's a regular Google search, Western spiritual teachers, what will pop up? And this is what came from I just wanted to see, what's Google going to throw up? Now keep in mind that some traditions do not give any leadership roles to women, so that might eschew this graph. But I only went to the first page on Google, I randomly selected what was easy to find statistics, and all of the blue is the amount of men in the lists of recommended spiritual teachers, and the orange are women. The slide is doing something funny. Can you? It's splitting up things there. Can you pop onto the next one, please, Dan? Okay. Of this data, 66% are Caucasian, 5% African American, 0 non-binary, 0 gender fluid, 0 transgender. And the next one, among the men, 60% are Caucasian, 2% are African American. And I did this search in the US. So this is what a student is finding if they put in Western spiritual teachers. So what cultural agreements are already in place that this is okay? Is this okay? When I was sharing this with Sneha and Phil, they said, well, what's the demographics of the ASI? We have transgender, we have gender fluid, but it felt like it would look like a trophy. It would be an us and them. I couldn't do it. But all I can say is way more women than men who have chosen to join an organization by signing up to be ethical, by signing up to a code of ethics to say I want to be accountable in my role as a spiritual leader. That's what is involved in becoming a member of the ASI. It's free. But I want to be respectful. I want to continue to work on myself. That's the deal. And if you want to do that, great, come on board. Mostly women. And so, next slide, please. So, I started digging into the status power thing. It's gender, social class, ethnicity. Are you robed, are you not robed? Your age, your education. of course, with social media, your celebrity status, and your sexual orientation. None of these things are earned. But we have a bias. Like if somebody came in the door here with a hoodie on and a backpack, and somebody came in behind them with a robe, would you see them differently? We would. And there it is, the indoctrination of status in our own unconscious, and how we change our relationships with people because of these things that they never earned in the first place. So this is in all of us. So the ask is, find out how your own perception has been influenced by status, which is hierarchical. But some hierarchy is okay, but maybe this type of hierarchy has come from patriarchy, coloniality. Where does it come from? And this is the investigation we each have to do, huh? So the next slide. There's a thin line in my brain between status, power, and the structures of privilege. So a system of privilege elevates one group by oppressing another. That's the deal. You don't get to have a privilege unless somebody else is paying the price. But status power is a privilege, because there's somebody who has less power. If you have any of these criteria in the last slide, somebody else has less power. And so, are you exploiting that extra power? Are you even aware of that extra power? Is it a given because you've always been a white guy, or, robed, or like. But to sustain status power, and this is where the ASI is interested in making a re-intervention. To sustain status power, you've got to protect yourself from how you impact others. You've got to turn a blind eye to the pain you're causing somebody else. So when you have more status and somebody else is shrinking because of it, you have to ignore the impact you're having on them. And so without using a system of feedback, without listening to people, when we project and say, well, that's your ego, they don't really understand what I'm talking about because my realization is much deeper. We're protecting ourselves from other people's feedback. We have all kinds of sophisticated filter systems to protect ourselves from how we impact others, because it's more comfortable for us to feel free and safe in our own biases and prejudices, and to enjoy our privileges rather than really listen to see what is the impact that we have on other people. Coupled with that, have an inadequate or no system of accountability in place. There's a lot of this going on in spiritual leadership today. Go to the next slide, please. So the resistances, it's like, but it's a no-brainer. Of course we should be respectful and treat everybody, give everybody a voice and respect their impact. But that's not the reality of it. These resistances to accountability are pretty popular. I answer only to God. That's a common one. My students wouldn't understand. Students project their stuff onto me. They want me to be a parent, the therapist. It's their ego, and they just don't see it. And so some of these things might be true, but why are you using them in the first place if you're a spiritual leader? Are you using it because it's true? And are you still able to connect respectfully with the person who has this type of relationship with you? Or are you using it as to ignore their voice and to take their power away and to wallow in your own privilege? What's going on there? Because when we attach to these things and we dismiss the voice of another, mistreatment and oppression are bound to occur. It's inevitable. Next slide, please. We are talking about a distribution of power. It underpins privilege, it underpins oppression. So power over, instead of power with, sustains colonially influenced hierarchy. We can have a role of being a leader and be fully responsible for the extra power that role power has given to us. And be 100% accountable for that power. And that's power with the person who is in a different role to you. They have their personal power, you have your personal power, and you have role power. So you're super responsible here. But the other person, they have their power too. But if you have power over, that means somebody else is under. And here's where that model of oppression comes in, where privilege comes in. I'm going to have extra power, so you're going to have less. And this is where it gets dangerous. And there's a thin line, you know, between taking full responsibility for your own role and where do you actually have power over? Where are you kind of enjoying the last word? And that's something pretty sticky within ourselves. Next slide, please. So many great minds have said you cannot create something for the future or something that brings real change from the system that's already broken. It has to come from something new. And so our approach to this at the moment, it's a work in progress. We can't look at power over, we have to look at building something that has power with as its core value. So relationships are a central focus. Because the relationship between the English and the Irish has taken a friggin' 100 years to come to this new agreement. And there is a new agreement now, and the animosity it's gone. It's gone, but it took 100 years. And it took an agreement in the 90s where the English government recognised the autonomy of the Irish government and the ruling system in the north of Ireland. So that tripartite agreement is what put us all on an equal page. It was about the relationship being redefined and everybody agreeing what the relationship was between them. And we as spiritual leaders don't often enough define the relationship between ourselves and our students, ourselves and our followers. We don't define it. We slide into what's been there culturally. So all the bad habits, we cruise right into them. And it's not fair on our students and our followers. And it's not fair on ourselves either because it's kind of toxic. So relationships have to be the central focus. We need to have an awareness of our human needs. And my years of studying Advaita Vedanta brought me to a blind spot of there is no mention of the Guru's needs. And even knowing somebody who is still editing books that Ramana Maharshi's ashram are publishing, they're editing out any place where he might be less than superhuman. So this editing continues on, denying the humanness of the Guru, of the teacher, of the spiritual leader, of the meditation class, yoga class, all of it. How do we reframe our human needs and how do we respond to our needs as human leaders so that we can address the toxicity that we're currently bringing into many relationships with our students? And in this way, we can cultivate respectful leadership. A good place to start, am I meeting my students' needs? Next slide, please. Do we even know what our students' needs are? Have we made an assumption of what our students' needs are? Is my intention corresponding with my impact? And so if we don't ask them what impact we've had on them, we have no clue of monitoring if our intention is, and we should be responsible for our impact. We have to take responsibility for our impact. So we're working towards, in the ASI, a healthy system of feedback which will support our students to have a voice. And since I started using, in my own teaching practice, since I started using pretty personal feedback forms for my students, and I have it on my website as an ongoing thing, not just after an event. Questions like, did you sense the integrity of the teacher, me? Did you sense the integrity of the teachings? Were you heard? Were you treated respectfully? These kind of questions need to be in our feedback forms. And since I started bringing those types of questions into my feedback forms, the type of student who came to hear me talk or participate in a retreat changed. I found I had students with more autonomy, more eloquent, able to articulate what they wanted, what they didn't want. Total game changer. The projection, the ones who wanted a parent were not interested. They just didn't come, or they came once and they left. But it changed the whole culture of the student body, because now somehow autonomous individuals who wanted to be in their personal power and be in power with their spiritual teacher were attracted to my work. So we can't choose not to participate. I mean, if you're kind of going, yeah, that doesn't apply to me, well, I would question. If somebody has that response, then what's going on is that they're attached to the privilege, and the privilege continues. There's a blind spot there. It's very comfortable to stay in the place of privilege. So to evolve beyond status power, one can A, be fully responsible for how one impacts others. B, have a robust system of accountability in place so that a teacher's needs are met separately to the student's needs. So the teacher's needs, yes, we have human needs, just like everybody else. And so how do they get supported? And where we've seen in the ASI, where we haven't kind of matured enough yet in the culture of spiritual leadership, all of us, I'm including myself, is that when a teacher's need pops up because of an interaction with the student, the teacher as yet doesn't seem to be skilled enough to say, oh God, that's my own need, I've got to park that and take care of my own need later, and let this be about their need. So we have teachers who are being defensive on the spot, who are just apportioning blame or just zipping and shutting up the student. There's a lot of that going on, rather than, oops, I can feel myself getting, I don't like this conflict, I don't like it, park it. You're the adult here, you've got extra responsibility here because of the role power. So park it and have a place to decompress later on. But many teachers don't have a place to decompress later on. And so this is where we've got to find buddies, you know? And so the last slide, please. So meeting teachers' needs, I see as a pivotal, or in the ASI rather, we see it as a pivotal turning point in the culture of spiritual leadership, to bring in respect between teachers and students, to bring in feedback, to bring in accountability, to stop the abuse of power, basically. So recognizing we have human needs, number one. Noticing when our needs arise and don't dump them on the students. Not expecting our students to meet our human needs. So if you want to date somebody, well, don't go to the student pool. If you need friends, don't go to the student pool. Make an effort, get out there and establish a life for yourself. Have clear boundaries. The ability to be vulnerable, we have a lot of work to do in that area. A lot of spiritual teachers who very much identified with the role for many, many years are not comfortable being vulnerable, are not in touch with their own needs enough to actually own them and to say, actually, I just feel a load of shame, or I feel imposter syndrome, or I feel, it's like, all right, okay, can we have a safe space? And we're just starting our third pilot of peer support to allow places that are really, really safe for spiritual leaders to learn how to and have experience and practice being really vulnerable. So that's a change in the culture that needs to be normalized. In 10 years' time, that will seem like such baby talk. But right now, it's a cutting edge. In addition to the ability to be vulnerable, we need a trusted friend who reflects blind spots honestly. Because when you see a feedback form, for example, that comes from a student, if a student is pointing you out to your own blind spot, your own blind spot is going to make sure that you'll filter it out. That's what a blind spot is. You will filter it out, you won't see it at all. And so with a trusted friend, and I have an example for myself, there was there was some feedback, and I was like, yeah, but that student just doesn't get what the teaching's about at all. Like, she's just looking for healing. She's not actually interested in the teachings. And I was with a friend who I trusted, who wasn't a spiritual teacher, who said, Jack, you're talking like a parent. Like, this person isn't a kid. Well, are you the one maintaining the parent-child relationship? I was like, oh, Jesus. Oh my God, that's totally what's going on here. And it was wonderful, like, oh my God, look at that. Just my bias of like, rather than, what are the students' needs? What's the person saying here? What do I need to learn about myself here? How can I better serve their needs? Or am I the wrong person for them? But I couldn't even go there because the blind spot that the student was pointing me was so active I couldn't even see it. So when we're dealing with feedback, we have to have a trusted friend who kind of knows us pretty well, who has no intimidation around us, who's kind of saying, hey, yeah, it's kind of full of shit what you're talking about. We need somebody who's going to be able to say that to us. And peer support is essential so that we can practice a place, we can have a place where we can practice being fully human. We've no problem with the divine part, the Brahman part, the beyond Brahman part. The trouble is where the rubber hits the road in how we show up as human beings. That's where the evolution of spirituality will come from. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much everyone for your attentive listening, and thank you so much to our presenters for their wonderful presentations.